variety of different folks that will be presenting this evening. So the first agenda item we have this evening is to meet the board with new hires. Just want to do those introductions.
Thanks, Mayor and Board. Tonight, we've got three new Parks and Recreation employees, so I want to introduce them to you. Is there someone else coming from Public Works? Okay. On your left is Stephen Eccles. He hails from Iowa, not a Hawkeye, a cyclist.
Oh.
He's lived in Windsor since 2012, educational background in horticulture, reading, gardening, archery, and he's learning Brazilian Portuguese. The one bad thing about Stephen is on his first day, I had to send him home because he came to work in a Broncos shirt. So we paid him, but I had to send him home to get a
But
change.
Steelers is okay.
Steelers is approved. Broncos, not so much. So anyway, Stephen.
So are you saying that he had too much sense to work for you? I'm not sure why you said that.
So anyway, if you want to stand and introduce yourself a little bit more, give them more background, and please don't talk about the Broncos.
Okay. I'm from Iowa, went to school at Iowa State. Came out here because my wife took a job with Pruder School District. And I worked with their outdoor services as a seasonal for 6 years. And then my wife left the school district, and for me to get insurance, I ended up driving bus for the school district so I could get my insurance. So I did that for 3 years, and then I happened to look at I was looking for seasonal to see what they had, and I saw a couple positions here that the town of Windsor had, so I put my name in the hat, and I'm working as a cemetery technician.
Why are you learning Portuguese?
I've been to Brazil twice on a couple
Brazil.
of missions trips, and there's quite a few Brazilians that go to school at CSU, and I help them with English, and they help me with Portuguese.
Besides Stephen is Lynn Morales. She's our new horticulture technician. She's been in the area since 1993, loves hiking, camping, looking at plants. If she'd have said hunting, she was right up my alley. But so anyway,
She's a vegan.
and she also loves to take photos of all the plants that she's now gets to do all the time. And you've already seen, I think just last week, started putting the plants outside of town hall and downtown. So she'll be beautifying our flower beds throughout our parks and downtown area. So Lynn.
I'm not very good at speaking, but yeah. So I've been having a great time. This is the beginning of my 4th week, and just running around and putting flowers in all the pots. It's been wonderful. I'm working with a great team of people. I work under Ken Kawamura, and I get to work with Blake McGrew, and a couple seasonals are awesome. So I'm having a great time. I love the town of Windsor. I love the Front Range. Like he said, I've been here since 1993, and they haven't been able to get rid of me yet. And I think Windsor's a lovely little town. I'm really excited to be here, and everybody I've met is just so wonderful. Let's see, as far as my background, I have a few degrees, a couple of them from CSU, like the last one was a master's in ecological restoration, so it's a master's in natural resource stewardship, specializing in ecological restoration. I love to build trails and do restoration work on my spare time, so I go out and do all those kinds of things. And I don't know, I just love being outdoors, and I love beautiful plants, and I'm really excited to be here. So I hope I can do an awesome job, and that you guys will keep me around for a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So and last is Helen Lynch. She's a new guest service coordinator, new to Windsor and Colorado since 2018, and she hails from the state of Washington. So.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate getting to know all of you briefly. Like you said, I came from Wenatchee, Washington, actually. It's about 2.5 hours over the Cascade Mountains, central Washington, tucked in a valley there by a river. And I found that Windsor has a lot in common with Wenatchee. It's about 50,000 people. They have a good community feel, which I've noticed since I've been here, which is great. So I was the retention specialist of the Wenatchee World newspaper. So I worked with the public and our subscribers in keeping them subscribed to the paper. And so part of that was updating cards for auto pay, gently reminding people to pay their bills. And so after my first full year there as an employee, they gave me the honor of being Employee of the Year. And that had nothing to do with my salesmanship. It probably had more to do with me loving and connecting with people. So I think that was part of it. So I'm gonna be just real transparent with you tonight. One of the main reasons I moved to Windsor was my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer last April, and so we wanted to be near family. My entire family's here, including my 2-year-old granddaughter. So it is a joy to be here. And so since he passed this March, I found that there's been so much support here in this community. So my husband and I actually joined the rec center in October. So that was a release, and we found that the employees there and the staff there was incredibly kind to us. So when one of the guest service coordinators said, "What are you gonna do next?" And I said, "You know what, it depends on where I get a job." So I said, "I love this community. I love the rec center, so I'm hoping it's somewhere in Wenatchee." And she said, "Apply here." So I was blessed to be hired by the town of Windsor a month ago, and it's been a great fit, I believe, for me and hopefully for the town as well. So I want to dig deep roots here and have the same sort of community feel that I had back there in Wenatchee. Some of the other stuff that was I enjoyed doing there was volunteering regularly at the Lighthouse Soup Kitchen, which was feeding the homeless and lunches and preparing their meals and stuff, and volunteering at the booths for fundraisers for the town as well. So there's a good connection there as far as that. I love the walking paths around here, the beautiful mountains, walking around Lake Windsor. So it just feels like an ideal fit for me. So looking forward to calling Windsor home. So thank you.
Two of our best friends are in Wenatchee.
Oh, awesome.
We're gonna be there in a few weeks.
Oh,
Visit them, so
yes.
a lot about Wenatchee.
Well, good. Have you been there before?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope gets as good a plane as I made it. They do boast of being the Apple capital of the world.
Yeah.
All right, I guess I'm up. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ken Berman. I'm the division manager at Public Works, and I'm here tonight to introduce Alex Ainsworth.
Hello, Alex. Been here about 2 months. Sorry I missed this first one. It's hard to find babysitters sometimes. Here I am, sorry to keep you guys waiting. I started off in the water department over at the city of Loveland. Kind of random out of nowhere. I had really not much experience with the water part, but I really do enjoy it. It's very fun. All the equipment and putting stuff together, working with your hands, and it's the brain part and it's just the engineering part of it. I really enjoy it. So 2 months have been awesome here so far. Born and raised Fort Collins, moved to Loveland. Spent about 5 years in the Army, so the only time I've ever spent really out of state, and then had some options and decided to come back here. So I've been back in Colorado for about 6 years now. So got 2 little girls. One's 7, one's 6 months. We just moved to Severance here recently, so pretty local. I have a little bit of experience with Windsor, not too much, but like everybody else said, it's a wonderful place. Everybody's been super nice so far, so I'm really looking forward to being here long term. So very nice to meet you all as well. So fine with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any others? With that, maybe we should go around and make introductions too. I'm not sure if they know everybody who's here as well, so why don't we start?
I'm Ken Bennett, town board. Been in Windsor for 7 years now, live mostly in Loveland. And we visited the town a number of times and just fell in love with the places. And so the people here are awesome, the opportunities are awesome here, so glad to have all of you a part of our community.
I'm Barry Wilson, also on the town board, and I moved to Windsor. I was in Loveland, but came here in 2000. And I think the thing that got me was when we came to 4th of July at Boardwalk Park. And that's when we decided to move to Windsor and started focusing on our search there about 20 years ago. So, nice to meet everyone.
I think I met everybody. Hello.
Paul Renmeyer on the town board, District 4. Good to meet you all. Glad you're a part of the community and welcome aboard. Look forward to getting to know you all.
I'm Miles Baker. I'm on the town board in District 1, which is on the far west side of town. I've lived here 13 years.
Tom Jones, town board from District 5. And we rolled into town in 1971. Windsor was 1,500 people. And now it's increased by what, 3,000%? And a lot of changes in almost 50 years.
I'm gonna stand up because you're too tall sitting in the chair. I'm Christy Melendez, and I am proud to be the mayor of Windsor. I'm a 4th generation Windsorite who raised a 5th generation. Moved here, I was born here, but I came to Windsor when I was 3 months old, traveled around, and then settled here permanently in 1971 as well, so.
Good year.
And have been here ever since, so. And I'm assuming they know all the rest of the other department heads.
Look at
so-
me.
So welcome to Windsor, we welcome all of you, and many successes. Thank you.
His gun is not loaded.
He only has one bullet.
But if we had a board like something other than water, we could go up to the refrigerator real quick, if anybody wants a Coke or something. Does anybody want anything other than water?
Do you?
He does.
Go make a run, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Well, I'm doing run up. Does anybody else want anything?
I'm fine with water.
Anyone else?
Anybody else?
While they're shopping, we do have some new snacks with some beef jerky
No. I'm fine.
and protein. Just one?
But maybe we catch you, I never catch you. Well, I saw him when Miles had his Coke, I heard him ask.
Yeah, he's trying to get
Trying to get Eric to go get him one?
Yeah,
Eric wouldn't do it?
I think he was. Christy told me, so.
Maybe for the floated like employee of the month out there or something.
That was me coming into town today.
That's out here, it's kinda nice.
5:30. 5:30. Yeah, it's crazy, huh?
I was out at that reclamation project, they had a tour out there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on that tomorrow.
I'm gonna try to go tomorrow.
It's pretty interesting.
That's tomorrow, right?
Eric said it was pretty muddy out there. I was just coming into town at 5:30.
So 2 o'clock?
From where?
Yes.
I was up on the hill on 392.
Oh, yeah.
We need to direct somebody, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
You didn't tell us.
Yeah.
He ran. I'm impressed.
Pretty impressive.
He's pretty quick, quicker than he looks.
Are we all back? You wanna get us started? Are you the one who's gonna lead us, I'm sure, on the DUI task force?
Yeah, I'll make it as brief, because I know you that 181 is probably gonna pick up a bulk lion's share of your night. So, a few months ago, I attended a meeting in Loveland at the Embassy Suites. It was hosted by CDOT and NHTSA, and Chief Tyser from Loveland, and Ken Farber from CDOT approached the idea of forming a state or a DUI task force. It would be the first in the nation, first in Colorado. The task force is going to be focused on basically traffic safety, DUI, alcohol and drugs enforcement, and trying to attempt to try to push the needle in reference to safety on the highways. Our DUI enforcement, I think, Tom, you were here when we started the DUI, the first DUI task force, our first DUI grant we had in Windsor back in the day. So the state still offers those DUI grants, and we just qualified for one for next year for $8,000, which we spent in Well County specifically. But the DUIs and DUI enforcement has kind of been stagnated, and so there's this movement to try to move the needle, which is basically their tagline they're using, is move the needle, to try to move us past this stalemate with DUI enforcement. And so we're working really hard on that. So anyway, Kim came up with this idea with this task force, and with Chief Tyser from Loveland being a huge proponent of this also, it was decided to try to start this in Larimer County. So they're going to sponsor a grant, well, it's not a grant, it's just a cycle of DUI enforcement for a 3-year period. They're gonna put like $600,000 into this process. So each agency, there'll be 6 officers assigned to it out of multiple agencies: Larimer County, Loveland, Fort Collins, Windsor, and we will each be able to recoup up to $100,000 in basically employee costs for salaries, benefits, overtime, and some.
100 per year?
Yeah, 100 per year.
For just
For-
three?
for a 3-year
And
period.
can you just clarify again, who's putting in the initial 600?
CDOT.
Oh, CDOT.
Yeah, and through NHTSA, CDOT, I think it's a joint
Okay.
study. So, and the money technically comes from those that are arrested and charged and convicted of DUI or DUID. And so it's a self-funding program in that regard. So, so after the 3-year period, or towards the end of it, they hope to reevaluate it and decide if they want to continue it on, or and maybe expand it to other counties and other locations. And so we would need to provide the officer, which they'll pay for, but some of it will need to provide a patrol car and some equipment that, uniform and things of that nature. But otherwise, all the costs will be borne by CDOT through the grant.
So the 100 grand will cover everything we need for this,
It won't cover. They won't pay for patrol cars,
not the car?
and they won't pay for say your badge, some of those things. But they'll pay for computers.
Well, it'd be salary, benefits, training, like all the big things with personnel.
And there are some equipment things that they'll purchase, laptops and things of that nature, that are in addition to that. But all this, right at the moment, this is kind of a last minute process. Kim wants to have this up and running by the 1st of July. And so the budgets are to be turned in, budget requests to be turned in by June 26th to Kim. And we've already been working with her on what will be authorized and what's not authorized. So the hope is that we'll have it done.
Do you need an IGA, or is
Yes,
that
we're working,
circulation?
it's working on that. The Loveland town attorney is working on the idea right now. It'll be shared out with others, and that should be coming out directly. So I'll be sending that to you, Ian.
So the request is mostly just for a new patrol vehicle or a new vehicle for the?
Just a new vehicle, and that vehicle will be, again, we won't probably have to order it. So by the time we get it, it's probably gonna be close to the 4th quarter of the year, by the time we get everything in. We're still waiting on new purchase vehicles from Ford that we may not get until the 4th quarter.
What does a vehicle run these days?
Fully outfitted, about $62,000. But some of that cost will maybe mitigated, I'm hoping, because some of the radios and the MDT and stuff, I'm hoping we can charge back to the CDOT.
Some of the equipment,
So
maybe?
that's some of the stuff that we're waiting for Kim to give us an answer on what is allowable to be reimbursed.
Where are Loveland, Fort Collins, and Larimer County in the process?
All probably at least a step or one step further. So we're all in the same, pretty much the same footing. So
Can they get started without us, or are we, because we're not?
they want to start the whole thing at one time. So can we start? Yeah, they would want, but Kim really wants to start this as a unit together at the same time. The main purpose for that is they want to have as much true data as they can as early as they can, so the quicker they get everybody up and running. So there'll be training for the officer or who we send, depending on what kind of training they currently have, such as DRE certification, those types of things, which all would be paid by CDOT or reimbursed by CDOT. All our costs will be run through Loveland. They have a Loveland sergeant that'll be assigned to the task force, who will be taking care of all the paperwork. So we'll submit our documentation to them. She'll submit it to CDOT. CDOT will reimburse us. They check it at the court, in the court.
Chief, after, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Go ahead.
After 3 years, does this become some kind of an unfunded mandate, or that we'll have to start picking up?
No,
the
we
cost of it?
can opt out at any time, Tom. And then at the end of the 3 years, their hope is that it shows it is successful, and they can continue the funding for this, and as they expand it across other counties across the state. At the end of the 3 years, if they decide it's not working, we would just hopefully know far enough in advance that we roll that position into new hires for the following year.
Same with the car?
Well, car would just be every.
Car could just
Yeah.
be a regular.
So, and without holding me to task on this, I think our cars are lasting anywhere from 5 to 6 years.
I think cop cars, we try to do 5 years.
Yeah, so you're looking at a 2 year cycle, so we'll have it for two years, if we went away from the task force, we'd be in the fleet for 2 years.
You said the money, we'll recoup money from people that are convicted, is that how it?
Not we, the
Oh.
CDOT, so when someone's arrested and charged and there's a conviction, there are fines and stuff that gets paid into this fund, and so that the CDOT collects that and they disperse it. So right now, yeah.
Dispersed based on how many arrests the municipality or
No,
evenly, or
it's kind of it's a nebulous funding formula, what they use, right, we just got word from Lee Burke, who is the representative for law enforcement for our region, and Windsor was awarded $8,000 for DUI overtime enforcement for next year, and that goes for things like, we pay overtime for guys who work either saturation patrols or checkpoints if they have them, so we work with the Well County agencies to try to do increased enforcement in certain time periods.
So how does it work? You guys, will Windsor officer patrol other municipalities or?
For the task force,
Yeah,
yes.
the task
The task force, they'll be signed to, their assignments will be Laramie County centric, and it would be all in Windsor, so they're still working out the scheduling and that thing. So let's say that they'll be working a 4-3 shift, weekend nights. So if they don't have an assignment, then say Loveland and Laramie County and Windsor may work a saturation patrol along Harmony or 34 and other areas of that nature. But they also may be called up to Estes Park to work an event up there, or Fort Collins, CSU, or the Windsor,
Or the ranch.
The Bud Event Center.
Yeah. Is the task force, am I calling it the right?
Yeah, it's a DUI task force.
Are they, so our officer, would he or she be wearing our uniform that says?
Yep.
So he could be a Windsor looking officer up in Estes Park or something? Okay.
And we currently do that, Paul. It's under an AOA. We'd have mutual aid agreements, and they would be sworn in by the sheriff to perform law enforcement functions any place in the county. So, and technically, with state law, officers can enforce the law any place in the state if it's misdemeanor crimes.
I'm guessing this is in part in alliance because at STAC, we had a huge, CDOT has a huge initiative right now in terms of safety. And looking at, they've had, how they can bring down the crashes.
Yes.
And all of that. So I think this probably is part of that safety measure because they're making a huge push. You're gonna see more and more safety things coming out of CDOT because that is their top priority.
Yeah. And I think the selection of Laramie County specifically was for one of two reasons. One, you have Chief Tyser, who is a strong proponent of traffic enforcement with his background, and Laramie County has far fewer municipalities within it. Well County has a huge need for safety improvement. Some of highest levels of death with accidents are in Weld County. But we have so many municipalities and stuff, it's a little harder to rank everybody. So with the support of, you know, Chief Tyser and the other chiefs in Claremont County, they felt it was a great place to pilot this program.
I think it's a really good initiative. In terms of staffing, you said 6 of our officers would be assigned.
No.
I'm
It's
sure that's
one officer,
One officer.
one officer from Windsor,
6.
and then
Okay.
5 other would come from either Laramie County, Loveland, Fort Collins,
Okay.
CSU, Estes Park.
So workload for our staff.
So we
One
would-
person is assigned over to the task force, what does that do to the rest?
Well,
Is
we
that a
would
problem?
backfill that position
Okay,
and hire a.
you'd hire some, okay,
backfill.
okay, gotcha.
And so
Okay.
this, again, so we
Okay.
would be kind of a wash as
Okay,
far
so
as
watch then.
staff goes.
So you're gonna take an existing officer for this, because you can't wait to bring on it, because they wanna start this sooner rather than
Exactly.
later. But if, otherwise, if we knew about this ahead of time, we would be hiring specifically maybe for this position.
Probably not, Mayor, from the standpoint that when we assign somebody to, especially a task force like this, well, number one, we want to make sure that they're grounded in our policies, training,
Right.
and understanding that we feel comfortable with them operating in a unit that's kind of ad hoc away from us, specifically with direct supervision.
Well, so it's exactly the same like the SRO position for school resource.
Mhm.
The board authorized to hire that position. We'll hire somebody, but we're taking an existing officer, somebody who already knows a good fit, they're already trained.
Gotcha.
And so you just kind of backfill them, it's easier to bring them in and
We can train them up, so,
Okay.
yeah, so be a little easier process, so.
But it is specifically on the Larimer County side of Windsor,
Specific, yes.
or west.
Laramie County,
County
just
says-
like
oh, okay.
Laramie County as a whole, so.
Okay.
And I did ask him about, you know, the possibility of maybe extending that to Laramie County, Windsor, and they said, no, because of the funding formulas and how they're trying to break this out, that it really needs to be just Laramie County only.
so like northbound 13, you're good, southbound, watch your 6. Yeah.
So Rick, exactly what the logistics, is this group
Thursday.
get together and set policy and then pass it on to the other officers in the jurisdiction, or are they out actually doing?
They'll be
Patrolling?
doing the enforcement. So This
Okay.
is an enforcement team, and so they'll be out working whatever the assignments is. So that's still being worked out with the jurisdictions as far as how they do it and how they report back, you know, whether it's a catalog or actual paper log, we have to gather the data. And so they'll have a Loveland sergeant who will be assigned to the team. They'll be basically kind of spearheading assignments and things of that nature. But we will have some input into, you know, what's happening. So we wouldn't say, listen, we want all the enforcement to take place in Wellington, Estes, or Loveland. That's not in Windsor itself. They'll be bringing that enforcement stuff periods into Windsor also. And so I'd say there's no enforcement action or no enforcement team. They may be just actually working Larimer County side of it strictly by themselves.
There's many people that transition through our town. It's very likely that they might be stopping somebody that would have been driving through here anyway, so.
Yeah, DUI, DUID,
Right.
impaired driving it's
Yeah,
not
it's
centered to a
regional,
location,
right,
so
it's regional.
it's very transient.
Yeah, that was the word transit, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, so the next steps would be, I think we will have an IGA coming around for the board's approval sooner than later. So right now, it sounds like everybody's supportive of the idea, the concept, so staff will move forward and bring that IGA back to you.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Would the funding occur this year? Is it gonna require a supplemental budget for the 62,000 for the vehicle and stuff? or-
It's already happened, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that gets into the weeds, but I'm just asking
Yeah,
if that's.
it's not a big enough
I mean-
bid with our size of budget. I mean, I guess we'll see at the end of the year, but right now, I'm not concerned about.
Oh, okay.
You know, normally what we do is we have, the department buys the first vehicle, kind of out of capital, then after that, we put it in our rolling stock and we renew it, so we'll take a look and between chief and his capital budget and see what we can do, but.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
No.
No.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank
So if you take,
Thank you.
there's 2 sheets here, just take a pass them on. So, Mr. Sosowski had sent an email, his thoughts on both the DUI task force and Senate Bill 181 conversation. So, I just thought it was easier instead of trying to summarize what he thought, I would rather just let him speak for himself and, so.
Well, it would have been easier for you to be here.
Be
I mean,
short,
that's
shorter
just-
meetings then.
Oh.
I know it's hard to read,
Man.
Paul, but good luck.
So, well, yeah, I will summarize that, he just thinks it would be really tough for the town to regulate a lot of aspects with 181 and is in favor of us not doing anything in addition. So that's a summary of what he had to say.
Okay.
Right.
Are you gonna leave us off, Mr. McCarver? or-
Are you?
Yeah, I sent
your
I can-
introduction? Okay.
Yeah.
So the materials that you have in your packet are an outline that I prepared that is boiled down from notes that I prepared after reading Senate Bill 181 and holding it up side by side with the existing statutes that are amended by Senate Bill 181. So that outline is a pretty good boil down of what the bill does. The PowerPoint slides that were included in your materials, which I'm hoping my assistant will pull up, I'm not going to go through them because they really repeat largely what is in the outline and is probably, at least some of it anyway, is familiar to you. But in general, what I would say is Senate Bill 181 really changes the legal landscape under which we've been operating for as long as this topic has been on the table. For years and years, we have told this community we don't have regulatory authority when it comes to this industry, except in very specific and very localized areas. Certainly the operational aspects of it, the courts have been really clear all along. This is a matter of statewide concern and the state law preempts. This bill turns that completely on its head. It clearly says in at least 2 places that local governments have regulatory authority when it comes to land use and also just to the business of oil and gas exploration. So that is a significant change from what we've been talking about for as long as I've been doing this. And to me, where you begin with this is to recognize that what the bill says you may do doesn't mean that there is any requirement that you do anything. There is one area that I think may require your attention in the short term. Scott has been good enough to share with all of us a guidance document that was issued by the director of COGCC in which he lays out how they are going to be handling regulatory matters until the new regulations have been adopted by the commission. And so what you see in your materials is there's a lot of rulemaking that's going to take place at the state level. While we're waiting for that to conclude, the director has issued this guidance document that speaks to a couple of applications that pass through the commission. One is a permission to drill application, the Form 2, and a location assessment, which is Form 2A. Each of those forms now, under Senate Bill 181, has to contain a certification from the applicant that the local government has either waived any involvement in the decision about location of a new facility, or has adopted some rules and has made a decision about that application. So it talks about a waiver of that regulatory authority or the disposition of the location, the request for a location. So that comes to us before it goes to the commission. That's a pretty important thing for us to let the commission know. And in fact, just today we received a survey from CML asking, are you waiving your regulatory authority when it comes to this, or are you going to act? And so I think in the short term, this body, the town board, may need to make a decision about that. It isn't irrevocable, you could change your minds. But I think the commission is already, in the guidance document from Jeff Robbins, it says the commission is assembling a list of which communities are regulating location, oil and gas location, and which communities are waiving. So sooner or later, I think they're gonna come to us, the commission is actually gonna come to us and say, where are you on this? Go ahead.
So they have actually sent out the survey to ask do you already have an oil and gas process? And they asked maybe a half dozen questions, and we simply pointed out that we've got our conditional use grant process. And I don't think there was anything else in there that indicated any departure from the standard CUG process. They are trying to figure out which communities plan to make changes, which ones don't plan to make changes, so that they can hopefully have simultaneous conversations with multiple jurisdictions. Because if they try to sit down with every single local government, it'd take COGC forever.
Did they set a deadline to
They
make
haven't.
up your mind?
They haven't. They're working under the interim guidelines that Ian mentioned right now, but the rulemaking, the process has started, so.
This request for a waiver or disposition, is it on a case-by-case situation, or is it blanket for the entire town?
So the sense I get is that the community can say, we waive all regulatory authority over the location of oil and gas facility. That's a full waiver.
Okay.
I suppose you could have, if you're gonna regulate it at all, it's not a waiver. So even if you
Right.
say, we choose to regulate pads of a certain number of well bore holes, or we choose to regulate pads that are located within these areas, or, you know, you could have a hybrid of that, but that's not a waiver.
So it's not a case-by-case basis?
No, it would be a
It's
matter
not
of policy.
X company comes this week and Y company comes next week.
Yeah,
It's gotta be consistent.
yeah, I would
Which
think
I
it
think-
need to be consistent.
Okay, okay.
If we're to waive that authority for location, could we still maintain our CUG process?
Yes.
So they're not asking of our overall regulation, they're asking about our location.
Right.
So that's the one that's, okay.
This is just location.
It's
Just,
specific to location of oil and gas facilities.
And
But my other question on the waiver is that a proactive ordinance that says we waive it, or is it just inaction? You know, if the board just, well, we don't do anything right now, we don't do any ordinance, is that in effect a waiver? Okay.
I call that sort of a backdoor waiver where, because you don't have anything and somebody shows up and says, we're thinking about putting a drilling pad
Right,
here.
right.
If we don't have a policy, then what we say is, well, then go through our CUG process.
Because nothing would change with that. If we choose not to do anything, everything would just continue as we've always done.
That's right.
Because actually, I mean, just for clarification, we really just can't do anything we want. Because we have, the ruling does state, you have to be, with the regulations they put in place, you have to be equal to, or you have to do greater. You can't do anything less than what they've recommended in here, or what the recommendation has been.
Yeah.
So you can't do
They can-
anything, you have to, that's your starting point.
They can be equal to or more strict.
Right,
Yes.
right, but they can't be
They
less.
couldn't be any. yeah.
Right, so we really don't have total, complete control, because we do have to follow those particular rules or guidelines. But if we chose not to do anything, we can just go on as we've done with the CUG process to date.
Yes.
And we also have the best practices or, that we have in place too, that we make them follow. That's still ongoing and something that they look at?
Yeah, they're pretty much standard conditions of approval that we use each time that we worked with the industry to, when oil and gas picked up, we sat down with the industry and worked through the list of conditions that they could work with, I guess. And so those have been tweaked over the years with new technologies and new best practices, but they're largely the same that we've had for several years. One thing that the COGCC is really, the details that they're getting into are questions such as, if you have a local process, do you want the COGCC process to be completed prior to undertaking the CUG process, or do you want it to happen concurrently, or do you want to have your process precede? I think the answer that staff has given them, the COGCC, is it's best if it's running concurrently, so that we're not having them come to us with a fully engineered, approved plan by the state, and then it makes it that much more difficult for us to put any conditions on it that might change that. So concurrent review is what we've.
That's what you would recommend, or
Yeah.
that's what you would think would work
Right.
best.
Ian, can I ask a question? I mean, kind of where we are at with this. We have done our due diligence, we interpret the bill the way it has been explained, et cetera, the way CML's explaining it, et cetera. We're trying to put our mind best around how it all is kind of formulated. Is it a type of bill where we're gonna have to kind of play it as it goes, or meaning, for like, this sounds awkward, but I mean, wait, and there's probably a legal term for it, but wait to see if lawsuits around the state happen, you know, because they did something wrong, or they needed to have something in place to protect themselves here, so it's kind of like a trial and error type of thing, or a, you know, I'm you know, to know what we should have or what we shouldn't have, or wait, there was a loophole here that we need to button up, or, you know, wait, not for us necessarily, but for another municipality to get sued, or to have some kind of potential lawsuit to realize they should have done this or should have done that. I guess I'm trying to just understand as a kind of we take it as it comes, we, you know, try to interpret it the best way, but then if somebody else interprets it another way, then we retroactively have to try to solve it or patch it with you know, some ordinance or something. I mean, I'm trying to kind of phrase it the best way I can, because that's kind of the way I walk around reading, or walk away reading what we've surmised, is that it's to that effect. Where it's kind of I don't know how to put my finger on it, you know, but it
But we actually don't have to do anything though, Paul. We could act the same, which would be kind of like, to your case, we are looking at each individual case as it comes before us, because that's what the CUG does, isn't it? I mean, we look at each one that comes in, it's gotta go through the CUG, instead of just making a blatant statement across the board for one or the other. We make them all go through the independent CUG process.
Nobody's
And it-
advocating one way or the other. Just
No,
that's-
it's, yeah, it goes through,
Right,
and then
right.
it comes to it goes through to planning, and then, planning commission, and then it comes to the town board with some kind of recommendation.
Right, and I think if other best practices come out of what other jurisdictions are doing, or what the
Right.
industry or the COGCC recommends, we can start tweaking our conditions of approval.
I was gonna say, we could always go back at any time, could we not? And we could amend or add to our process down the road, instead of creating additional processes or
Right, and I'm not
additional
trying to advocate we do anything to try to,
layers of work for anybody, especially within the department.
So there's no manual, right? There's no manual for this.
Right.
And, you know, recognize the way that this bill proceeded through the legislature, there wasn't a lot of time for people to say, well, what about this, and what happens if, the perspectives on it were fairly narrow, and it got passed pretty rapidly. So what you don't know is whether there are issues with the bill until you try it. Just like with any new legislation, especially groundbreaking, a total reversal of the state's involvement in this subject matter. So there's no manual, there's no guarantee that what we do or don't do won't work somewhere else and wind up with litigation where we can learn from that, or might have to follow that.
right?
The current CUG, to me, it's, I kind of find myself stepping back and say, is that adequate? Is it doing what we want to do? Because there's not a lot to it. Air quality in conformance with state and federal guidelines, waste disposal in compliance with, you know, site grading, what's that, berms, temporary screening. There's not a whole lot to our CUG. And I could be wrong, my impression it was, you know, frac sites when that was developed were kind of smaller operations. Now we have these huge, you know, with 50+ wells and so on. So that's my thing, backing up. If we look at the CUG, is it doing what we want it to do? Because that is one option, you know, putting more to the CUG.
And that was created under a different environment.
Right.
This was kind of the best we thought we could do it, given the conditions set forth by the state. So maybe there is something more we could do, and I don't know why we wouldn't address the site location, at least to keep that option. Now, we may just say, yeah, that site's fine, but if someone comes to us with a site location that we don't like, and we've, whatever those two words are, if we waived our authority, then we have no recourse.
But Ian, what, I think with the site requirement though, would it be distance? Is that the major thing we would look at with that, or what other factors could we review?
I suppose you could look at buffers. You know, the whole topic of buffers was part of the bill that, the referred measure that ran through the state election a couple of years ago. Was it a year ago?
Not even.
Yeah, it all goes by so fast. But, yeah, buffers or, I think probably the buffers are what they're talking about. Does the local community intend to protect a river corridor or a school or a bus stop?
But I'm not even talking the setback distance, I'm thinking, they wanna put it on this piece of property, but it's sitting up, forget setback. Maybe that's not where we want it, because it's visually impacting the homeowners, when they could just as easily put it in this corner of the
But can't
property.
that be, isn't that part of the CUG process?
Location.
It's not.
I
Right.
have a quick,
We've accepted the
Yeah.
permitted site and
Yeah.
said, okay, with
Yeah.
that as a given, what more can we do under our
Right.
limited regulatory reach? So the
But we got the
CUG.
pace pad to move. How did we get?
It wasn't through the
That was a
CUG, that was
negotiation.
more of a negotiation between the property owners.
But we did have the ability to, we didn't like, and with a whole bunch of other folks, where something was located, and we got it moved to a different
They didn't have to
location.
move.
but it was pretty please,
voluntary.
would you please consider moving? Yeah, we had no authority. Well, I ask you a question, I'm not advocating. Yeah, okay, I
It's
just
okay,
want
I
to.
understand.
On this waiver thing, if we were to say, right now, because the state wants an answer, right?
Sooner or later, yeah.
Okay, pretty soon. If we were to say, okay, we're gonna waive, or we're not gonna waive, what's the time frame? Is that good for life? Is that good for a year? I mean, can we change our minds?
I think you
6
can
months
change
later?
your minds. There's nothing in the bill that says,
Okay.
once you elect to either waive or dispose of location questions, that you're stuck with it forever.
Okay,
The legislation seems to say that local governments have broad legislative authority to make these decisions,
Okay.
and I don't see anything that makes them irrevocable.
so the commission just kind of wants to get knowledge right now, what the picture is today, and it could change in 6 weeks, a year, or whatever. Okay, gotcha.
Because part of the CML survey was, had you done a moratorium, which is,
Right.
we're still thinking about it. So that's a gray area where you haven't made up your mind. You're
Right.
just saying we need time to
We
think
haven't
about
talked
it.
about it, no.
That's what I was gonna ask about, like Broomfield, I think they just declared a moratorium.
Mhm.
I mean, does that make sense? I mean, they're waiting to see what shakes out of the new Oil and Gas Commission, and you suppose they're working on their own set of rules at the same time, and then when that's all worked out, then proceed with whatever you're gonna do with oil and gas.
Well, I don't know what motivated Broomfield, they're not alone. I mean, there are a lot of communities that have the moratoriums. Think about the marijuana wars back in 2010, 2011. For those of you who were here for that, we established, I think it was a 90-day moratorium, because we didn't know what we were gonna do. We didn't know what the state regs were gonna be. And so we said, we're not gonna accept any more applications. We're not going to act on any pending applications. That's what a moratorium does, though. And in the meantime, the applicants are going, well, what about our opportunity here? The clock's ticking, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
So there is that perception that a moratorium basically denies people the opportunity to do something
Yep.
that wouldn't be.
I would adamantly oppose a moratorium. And if we wanted to do some kind of rulemaking, who would we don't even have anybody on our staff. I mean, if we don't let the COCGG do this, and air quality come to, figure this out, and they're gonna come up with a set of rules, or something. And we could always go by whatever, we could look at what those proposals are gonna be. because we don't even have, where would we go to even begin to find this? We don't have anybody on staff or on team to begin to do this.
So but believe me, that by talking about these things, I'm not advocating either. I'm trying to give you a perspective so that you could talk this through, and so I appreciate the question. The question of whether, and that was David Soslowski's point in his material that's here, is we don't have the expertise to monitor water quality, air quality, the other stuff that is truly operational. So that would be a commitment that this board makes to funding positions like that, or working with regional partners to do it. I don't know regionally what people are thinking about when it comes to that, but I agree that right now, we don't have the staff equipped to do that. I think the board could make a legislative decision that is not operational, like we're going to create a buffer, or we're going to, those kinds of locational questions aren't really driven by technology so much as what the board's appetite is for those kinds of measures. It's not an operational thing, it's more locational.
Right. One of the things with air quality monitoring, for example, I did talk to a council member in Longmont, and what they're doing is they're investing in air quality. So they're not having staff that goes out and measures, like with a mobile thing and measures at different sites. I think they're putting in one, maybe more, I don't know, air quality stations, and then basically they're making that data available publicly, so the CDPHE would get it, and they would watch it to the extent of, this level's really high, CDPHE, what are you guys gonna do to address it? So they're kind of more gathering the data and putting it out there now. Longmont went with CU. I went to a presentation at Front Range Community College about the program. It was very interesting, because they're able to separate vehicle pollution and oil and gas pollution. They can look at the different footprints. And then they look at wind directions, like a reverse forecast, where it's coming from, things like that. I haven't talked to anyone in Broomfield. They're doing something similar, except for they hired CSU to monitor their air quality standard. Now, one thing I read, I'm not sure if it was in this presentation or elsewhere, was, we could, if we did something like that, I don't know how much it would cost, but, potentially, having the industry potentially pay for it, chip in. It seems to be like one of the options here, I don't know. Or, like we had 3.8 million approximately in 2018, if a small portion of that was used to invest in, I guess, I'm not saying these are things we have to do, or, but these are things we could consider. We don't have to build an air quality monitoring department, and that there are other options.
Well, there may be something new, but, we're all grappling with something brand new. I don't know that we should be, at least Windsor stance, as long as I've been on the board, is we've not always gone down the path to run out and be the first at something. We've kind of have held that, where we've kind of taken a look back, a step back, and watch as some other communities, or give it some time for the process and things to go through, because I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to perhaps, or other communities that are going to be looking for ways that we all can partner or work together, to come to terms with this.
Yeah, I think there's so much uncertainty at the COGCC right now, that what came out of the May 15th meetings that staff listened in on, it sounded like they had so many permits in the queue that had questions, that they kind of put a lot of those permits on hold, and they're working through a lot of things on the fly right now. And I just think that once COGCC works through the rulemaking processes, we'll have, and see how the other communities proceed, we'll have a little bit better, clearer picture.
Right. I'm sorry, I think you said this already, but end of summer, they're gonna fall?
Fall was what I was thinking, but I may have mixed that up with another.
Because there's nothing, I think we would probably be safe to go status quo until at least we see, I mean, at least we see the first go round of whatever they're gonna come up with this fall, right? And they're not even gonna expect, I don't anticipate how they could expect us to make up our minds fully by then, or do you think they're gonna be breathing down our necks? But in the meantime, we could just say, we're moving ahead the way we've always
Business
operated.
as
We're
usual.
gonna keep our eye on all, what's going on. We're gonna see what the rulemaking's gonna come out of, and then we'll see what our options are.
I guess that's what I was trying to get at with my previous comment, is that we take it as it comes. If we find out there's unintended consequences going on in other communities that have developed legislation or developed, ordinances to, whatever, that going along with what you're saying.
Right.
That it's let's see what comes from other municipalities.
I mean, if they said they weren't gonna get to this for 3 years, then maybe we need to think about something else. But if it's coming in 6 months or by the end of the year, surely we will see something.
Yeah, we were pretty proactive on the marijuana issue though, so I think we kind of planted our flag that we're going out in front of this when we banned marijuana. So the precedence is there that we do move forward, and I think at minimum, we should claim the site location of the well.
I'm with you.
I mean, they're kind of like giving us that, it seems like we should claim that, and we don't have to move every location that comes before us, or I don't know how it's done administratively, whatever, but, we should at least retain that option.
That we don't waive our right to
For
make
location.
some decisions. I don't wanna waive our rights to say, we'll just take whatever the state comes up with, the minimums. I think we need to
Yeah,
have some
right now.
discussions. I mean, look at all these impacts. I think we need to have some discussions. Right at the top is the location and sitting. I mean, look around town now, and if we had these rules 5 years ago, would things be different? I think they probably would be. Maybe.
What are you referring to with that he agreed with?
The well location, where they put the well.
Where they specifically put it?
Yeah, right now, and I'm not talking
But
setback,
how
'cause
are we
that's
gonna
already
come
law.
up with our answer to determine, is it just on a whim that we decide what we like or don't like? Or how are we gonna be able to prove, to be able to have somebody actually move through a process? You have to have something in place that says what's gonna define your process, that says, for these people we allow and these people we don't, what's the difference? Is it just the day that
Our
We have
land use plan.
that
We have a framework with CUG,
feel
that's
like-
the framework that we have as a process. I'm saying at minimum, we should retain the right to this well site location.
Because the difference with what you're referencing with the marijuana is we had a huge majority of folks who were in support. It was a citizen initiative. And we had a whole bunch of folks, at least on the and even on the Limerick County side, who definitely did not pass 112, defeated 112, with all of that, so.
Right. I mean, when we took that initiative as the representatives, I'm not saying change the process, we have a CUG process, we have the framework in place. I'm saying let's at least add the site location.
And I'm saying, what does that mean?
That means if they're putting it here and it meets all the setbacks, we have no authority currently. But it could be a big visual impact to a neighborhood or something else. We could say, why don't you put it in this other far-reaching corner?
Or down the hill for noise or.
Whatever, I mean, they're like giving us this low-hanging fruit that we can at least.
So do we have enough?
So to address the mayor's arbitrary location
Yeah,
discussion or concern, we'd probably just need to come up with the criteria that, if it's an aesthetic value or if it's some other criteria that would, so that it isn't just a whim that we're making
Right.
our.
We have a height variance currently, I mean,
Right.
if it's an visual impact, if it's something about the neighbors and all of that, there's
Right.
4 or 5 criteria.
Well, why can't we just plug this into our land use plan or change our land use plan to accommodate it? I mean, I'd hate to see another oil and gas tank up on the bluffs. I mean, that's, that was supposed to be preserved at one time, the bluff lines, but
So
you
you-
can tell we really got away from that.
So yeah, back in the day, the zoning code only allowed oil and gas activities in industrial zones, I believe. And it was in the mid-90s when the Firestone or Frederick case came through that we had to go in and change the code to allow it as a conditional use in all zone districts. I don't know if the new legislation would allow us to go with a zone district-based location requirement.
It says we have local control.
I think you could. Location, siting, impacts to public facilities, water quality, noise, vibration, odor, land disturbance, cultural, emergency preparedness.
Air emissions.
It's a really broad grant of authority, but I think you're right, Scott, to avoid it being arbitrary, you need criteria.
You do.
Well, and I guess the other question is if all of our industrial ground is in one location in town, and they want to access the minerals that are on the other side of town, the technology doesn't allow them to go more than a couple of miles.
So that's where the technical review board, there's a portion of the outline that talks about the oil and gas, the director having the ability to convene a technical review board, which is sort of a referee between a local community that says it's gotta go out in the industrial zone, and the operator owner saying, well, the resources are 3 miles that way, how are we gonna resolve that technical issue? And so it's built into the legislation that if we do that, that either the applicant or the local government can ask the director to convene a technical review board and sort it out, or at least attempt to sort that out through that process.
And who's that, where does that board come from?
It's appointed by the director. So the director
Of
looks at the problem, COGCC.
So these people are on call, so to speak, they already will be appointed and known, and then just in the case or circumstance, they
I'm not
come?
sure,
Or
honestly,
they will be at
Kristen.
some point, they might not be
Yeah.
appointed today.
The
but-
COGCC?
Well, they are, but
No.
this technical, the tech.
Oh, I was also gonna say the COGCC now is a full-time,
Right.
those are full-time paid positions with the CO, they're not volunteer, part-time.
So, did you just say that one portion of the bill says that we have local control, but there's a review board that says, you don't?
So in that example, if we say we're regulating location,
Yeah.
and the permit to drill, the application for permit to drill and the application for a location assessment contains a certification by the operator, Windsor's making us go out there when our resources are over there. When it's set up that way for the commission then to break the tie,
Okay.
then the commission can make the decision without the assistance of a technical review board, or can bring in a technical review board to help sort through the technical issues behind a drilling location over here and the resources 3 miles away.
But they
I'm
can't-
using that as an
Yeah,
example.
gotcha, yeah. They can't get a permit though now unless the local signs first.
Right.
So, are you talking?
It's like a protest, it sounds like it's
Yeah.
a.
Sounds like
It's
a.
a-
Well, it sounds
protest
like a
process.
mediator too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, right, a
Okay.
Arbitrator,
mediation,
yeah.
so they're gonna listen to both sides, or they might, and use some, probably some some information, experience or experts that they might gather to determine that this,
Right.
what they're saying isn't accurate or true, or one or the other maybe.
I have one more question about, how does this apply to already established permits? Nothing, right? I
So-
thought that if you already have a permit, we don't need to say about that now, other than our traditional.
If the permit has gone through the process
Already.
as of April 16,
Okay,
then they operate under the old rules.
that's what I thought, okay.
If it's a pending permit or a new permit as of
Okay.
April 16,
Okay.
then the commission's stepping in.
And that's another important consideration, not that there won't be any more CUGs, but we did get such a wave 5 years ago that the vast majority of Windsor already has approved permits and CUGs for pads that, I think we'll see another one out in the Great Western Industrial Park, Kodak area that they're working on, but staff hasn't heard from any of the operators of new pads for quite some time. They're still working on drilling
I thought
out.
we were probably pretty close to being maxed out on.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, obviously, I can't ever say
There's
never,
exceptions, I
but,
know, but I thought we were pretty close to being maxed out in
right.
areas where they could. Well,
And-
they could 2 blocks from my house if they wanted to.
Well, between
Yeah, I
the
mean,
ones that are already approved in
Yeah.
Windsor and the sites that are on the periphery in unincorporated Weld County or Larimer County,
what about the urban growth area, or the managed growth areas?
now, the growth management area, there will
Growth
probably be other permits that we see, such as the Great Western Pad that's north of Kiger.
Wizard. Is that Wizard?
Yeah, the Wizard Pad, that one was
Okay.
recent.
So when we talk about like, I wasn't really kind of prepared to workshop any of this, but when we talk about like buffers or setbacks, I agree that the voters have spoken, but the one thing that always kind of stuck with me even during that election was like if a 500-foot setback, if it's not safe to put a well 500 foot from a house, why is it okay to put a house closer than 500 foot from a well? Same with schools or parks and things like that. So I think those are things that we need to discuss and consider is, you know, there might be some tweaks to it. I'm not saying we pick some number like 2,500 or whatever, but I think there are things that we need to look at in the rulemaking process. So, before we get to workshopping, I think we do have a lot of discussions on a lot of different topics. So, I'm proposing that we don't waive our, I mean, that was question number 1, right, Ian, is do we waive our ability to have these discussions about rules?
About site.
I mean, I didn't come in here tonight thinking we were coming out of here with a bunch of different rules and regulations and whatnot, but certainly I'm not prepared to say we're not gonna do anything and we're just going to, especially when it comes to location siting. I think there's a bunch of things on here that are overlooked. Noise, vibration, odor is a big one. The emissions and air quality are one of the things that are at the top of my list. And I would like to do something around that. Do I know what that is this second? No, I don't, but I think it is our duty to protect the air quality. And, you know, if we measure it and it's fine, then no harm, no foul. But I don't think that's the case.
Well, to answer your question, I think the decision about whether to waive or step into location and siting is something, if there's anything that, a decision that needs to be made, that's probably gonna be one that in the short term you have to face. The rest of it, as Christie said, could take a long time. Whether it's under the umbrella of a moratorium or whether you just field the applications as they come in and develop your approach while that whole process is going on, because that is.
And I think we can also with, and like Ian and everybody else, I'm not advocating for position, I'm just, but I think if the board does something now or doesn't do something now, we could always come back in 3 months, 6 months, whenever the COGCC puts in its rules. There's some other best practices. I mean, I think we could also review and say, okay, now we know Longmont does this, and we know Broomfield does this, and or whatever else. So staff could always bring this back for additional discussion. So whatever the board elects to regulate now, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to get it perfect. And we could bring it back later and say, okay, are there other things we need to regulate? Is there something we missed? Is there something else that somebody else is doing that's better?
Yeah, it's not like there's an impending need to do something today or tomorrow. I mean, certainly if there was, I mean, we would all be enacting upon that. But is there something needed to be doing in the long term, to your point, Miles, to protect what we want? Yes. But that, I think we need to make sure we get it right and to go through that process and make sure we have, other folks guiding us. We've seen some other things besides just internally what we can come up with and determine. Not that we don't have smart people, but there's a whole bunch of folks around the table who are experienced in this realm, and that's all they're gonna be looking at and studying, that are gonna be bringing us data. But I wanted to, so something that you said, so there's a lot already that have been approved that have not, that they could just start, that maybe aren't currently active, and they could start pulling something tomorrow, or a month from now.
Right, well, I guess, like the rain dance pad, for example, has, I think, 50+ wells approved in it. and they've only drilled the first 16. So that'll probably be an active pad for quite some time. We've got some pads that are up north that are just getting underway, and I think there are some over in the Kodak area that are.
Scott, those 50 wells at Rain Dance,
Mhm.
they're already done deal. We have, if we enacted something new, there's nothing we can do, right?
Right, the CUG's already been approved.
Okay. Whenever they drill them, even
Yeah,
if
they
wait-
even, at the time that they were approved, they told us it would probably be over a 5 or 6 year timeframe.
And that doesn't include like Merlin and some of the other stuff back there, what is it, the Vispa, Milkshake, Merlin, are you
Right.
56, does that go up when you include all those in that area?
Those are all separate pads.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, I don't know, I've talked to Shane about this, getting back to the, traffic and transportation impacts. County Road 13 is pretty inundated right now. It kind of goes gangbusters and slows down, but there's always activities. Today I would drive by, there's like 3 semis going in and out of there at once, you know what I mean? And so there's a huge impact on that. And to think that's only 16 of 56, or.
It's
that
over
they could-
50, I don't know the exact.
Yeah, so, but basically about a quarter of what it could be, almost, or a third. That's kind of daunting to me. I mean, so that's one thing with me is these mega sites and the impact within the community. It's a lot different than, say, that one over behind the new medical center where it's, just a couple of tanks and kind of a small operation. It seems like, to me, it seems like the CUG was written for those smaller operations. And now we have these huge, massive things with semis going in and out all day long in neighborhoods,
Big industrial.
The emissions, I mean, the constant, flaring, the combustor, the big sticks up taller than the walls. And so it just seems like, so if we measure air quality and it's not a problem, you can just say, Barry, there you go, you were wrong, but I think, but I don't, but that's something I do see it as our duty to look into it, and, I don't think I'm alone on this, when it comes down to it, but, when I looked at the thing too, emergency preparedness, kind of traffic and transportation impacts, underneath of that, it needs to be, it's really its own category. Cause, I sit down all day on Main Street now, these last few weeks, and I'm just seeing firsthand, I'm not just passing through like I used to, just all day long.
Right.
And it's not just oil and gas, obviously, but it is, that's a large portion of the truck traffic.
I had a question about the managed growth area. If someone wants to have a permit in there, who all has to approve?
Just the state and the county.
Just the state.
Right.
Severance would have a say, Windsor would not have a say.
Yeah, if it's outside of our corporate
If
limits.
it's outside the corporate limits, we have no say.
Right.
Can I clarify?
They're going to referrals on those, and
They do send referrals, and we did have the wizard pad.
Okay.
Because all of those directional wells were under Main Street. And so there were a lot of notices that went out to Windsor property owners, but the actual approval of the surface activities was in unincorporated Well County.
Understanding that our purpose tonight is not to identify all the technical things, I want to strongly advocate for several things. I've read the original bill, I tried to read some of the amendments. I really appreciated this. I've talked to some people in the communities, I've talked to some of fellow board members, I've talked to people in town, and I'm looking at this in 3 categories. And so I'm going to strongly advocate that we need to beef up the conditional use grant. I think there's things in there that could be done better for all of us in the community. Second thing I'm going to very strongly advocate for is local air monitoring. I've talked to the staff person at Longmont. They put $610,000, or they are putting $610,000 into a citywide system.
Okay, so that's more than one monitor?
Yeah, oh, yeah. And my question to them, I didn't get a complete answer, but what are you gonna do with that data? So it's like, okay, you gather data, what are you gonna do with it, I mean, are you gonna sue China? I mean, I did talk to them, and I've learned that there are mobile units that you can do on a small scale, 1 to 5 acres. And I'm gonna advocate very strongly that we look into that. I don't know all the technology involved. And I absolutely agree with David Soslowski that we don't have the technical staff, nor do I want one for our town. But I've used the analogy with a couple of you. You go to the doctor, they check your height, weight, temperature, blood pressure. Okay, it's just an indication, and then they tell that to the doctor, and the doctor decides. From what I understand, these local air monitors on a small scale can monitor air emissions. If there's a red flag, all we have to do is call the state can come out and inspect. So we're not gonna get into the technical game, we just wanna check the blood pressure, pulse rate. the
I
air monitor.
believe the
I think that's
state's air
very-
quality division,
They
don't they
have
have
the
one that
they
they
have
will?
it, they
that
tested
they'll-
it here.
Well, they'll bring
Yeah.
one out, so you, don't
Yeah.
they?
So regarding the air quality, I really pushed the CDPHE, they call it their CAMEL, it's Colorado
Mm-hmm.
Air Monitoring Laboratory or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. I tried to get them to bring that local,
Mhm.
put it out next to 2 or 3 of our pads
Mhm.
during a week so that
Right.
we could get a baseline. But you have to have a certain amount of power to the unit, otherwise they have to run a diesel generator and it throws off all of their air quality.
That's examinations
And
too.
so, yeah, so, but
Walmart told me they told me the company, someone's worked out this technology.
one,
And it's probably not perfect. Taking my blood pressure isn't perfect either. It's an indicator.
right.
And then we could, I think you made the point, we kind of have a duty to tell our citizens that, yeah, we've looked at this and we don't see any problem. Or, yeah, we think there is, we call the state in. So I think,
And I think, and I need to double check this, but when we were talking to the rain dance, the Great Western folks about the rain dance pad and putting the CAMEL out there, I believe they may have remote air quality monitoring
Yeah.
at the rain dance pad, Great Western does, that I need to follow up with them and just see what level.
If
So
we
I'd
get to
like to
that
see
point,
what we
we'll-
maybe already
Yeah.
have in place.
It could be.
And what we could get
Yeah.
maybe for an interim, whether
Yeah.
it's on loan or lease, before we invest our own
Right.
money. Because I'm gonna have
I
a
agree.
feeling that technology with now also is gonna it's gonna change
increase.
dramatically.
It will.
And there's gonna be something better
Yeah.
and greater and newer and.
if we get to that point, well, the law says we can have the industry pay for it.
Yeah.
But I would advocate that we do some testing before they start operation.
That's
Just
what I'm
so we can
saying.
tell people, yeah,
Maybe
there
we
was
can
stuff
get a
already on
hold
this
of-
land.
So, I mean, if we call the state, they're stretched pretty thin, I don't
They
think we
have
could just call them and say do permanent air quality in
No.
Windsor. I don't wanna shut the door on, I think we need to look into it, find out the cost.
I agree.
It can't be that
Yeah.
hard. Now, when I went to the presentation,
Mhm.
there were some people in there who were on one side of the issue or the other. The scientist who was doing it, he's like, I just measure air quality.
Right.
I don't get into this, that, or the
Politics,
other.
right.
But one thing that came out of there was if we had more air, so the state has things like, they measure ozone here, and like, that's it. They don't measure everything else that we would want to have measured. But the whole premise was if we could get more of these stations within all the different municipalities, we could make better decisions of how to improve our air quality.
So one of the, I'm thinking, I'm gonna advocate for small scale, something that we know we can manage. And I'm certainly open if you wanna look at bigger areas, but I think that's a responsibility we have. The third thing I'm gonna advocate for is site location. And 112, automatic 2,500 feet was ridiculous. Everything I know from talking to people in the industry, 500 feet is absolutely ridiculous from your house or school or anything. So there's got, I'm hung up a little bit here because I don't know what criteria to say 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet. I don't know how to say what is appropriate setback. And I think as a town, we ought to be looking at our aesthetics also. So I'm very open to us having a debate and study about what we do about location. I think it makes a big difference to the aesthetics of the community, health and safety. So that's the things I'm gonna advocate for.
Do you think it would behoove us to reach out to the neighbors, Greeley, Fort
Mhm.
Collins, see what they're thinking anyway at this point? And if we can reach some kind of agreement on a regional basis. Maybe we can share some of the costs of the
Yeah.
things you're talking
Sure.
about, Ken.
That makes more sense.
I think we know how Will County stands, but, I mean, as far as the other communities, Johnstown, just,
So the Northern Colorado Municipal Attorneys Association has a membership, as you might imagine, of all the way from Fort Collins down to Loveland and Berthoud and beyond. And I've asked them, what are you doing? I haven't received a response, although I understand either Severance or Timnath or both have a moratorium. But that was something Shane and I talked about 2 months ago. Was trying to figure out, well, what's everybody else up here doing? Understanding that Weld County may not change its approach, but that's probably a fair question to find out, what is the regional standard and is there room for collaboration?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ken, because I thought you said 3 things, and
Yep.
I might just have air quality
Well,
monitors and site
The
location.
CUG needs to be beefed up.
Okay, all right.
You know, whatever
I understand.
conditions that, you know,
Okay.
based on our experience and ideas, you know, whatever that is.
Okay.
The air monitoring, I think we need to do it on a very local level. No technical staff on our part, but some way that we would have an indication so we can call the state. They don't have enough inspectors to come out all the time, you know, but if we had an indication, call the state. Third thing is.
But are you, before you move to the third thing, are you okay though if we get there? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and not like it's all tomorrow.
No, I
It's
think
within
a few months.
a set time frame so we can figure,
Yeah,
see
'cause
what's
I-
all coming
I don't
out,
know how good the
see.
technical equipment is,
And,
right.
yes.
Yeah, exactly,
We should not
exactly.
be rushing into
Yeah,
this.
you know, we don't rush into something,
Yeah.
because
I mean,
again,
I
what
would-
do we do with that data?
I mean, I went to this presentation and it was by scientists and
Yeah.
they did show the equipment. I think the best air quality station is at Boulder Reservoir. That's the main one that does the best air quality monitoring. They don't have a dragnet of stations across Boulder County. It's this one really good station. It's like a brick shed with a bunch of computers in it. And then, so I don't know how much something like that costs, but that's kind of how I envisioned it,
When
was
we get into the
one
weeds of
thing in
things.
Windsor, and then there would be an upfront cost, obviously, to put it in.
Mhm.
The question I kind of had was, then what are we talking about maintenance, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
gonna require someone to maintain it.
I do like
And
the
I want to
idea if
debate
there
that
was
because,
a connection with CSU or with CU, some other, if we had an initial cost and then we had
Right.
a connection with, where you had, a PhD that does this for a living, that's
Right.
monitoring it, and it just, again, it kind of goes out and sent to the state, because kind of with early discussion, certainly I don't think, we're just now getting into MS4. Like,
Right.
internally,
We
we're
got
not
a
ready
lot.
Right.
to do that.
Well, and I think, yeah, because I think we need to make sure that we are getting some good advice as to what is best suited for our community, because when you can't just monitor, you have to know, you have to be able to know before you set your baseline,
Right.
like, a lot of different things so that you don't jump to the wrong conclusions and information. And I'm sorry, there might have been 100 scientists there, but I don't care, because I think we need somebody who needs to look at Windsor and specific to Windsor and what would work best in Windsor and what would help, and do we need one, can one do it? Do you need one here and one there? But I don't know what that looks like. And I think part of that, hopefully that discussion will come as to
Yeah.
if there should be, maybe maybe there will be a TAC team, not the TAC team that you're talking about, but I can envision there's gotta be some kind of a team
Right.
that's gotta become available in the near future, that communities like us who have questions, that can come to
Right.
talk to us specifically,
Right.
because it's not a one serves all.
I don't think anyone was saying that. I think if we wanted to do it, I think we'd invite some of these groups in to tell us what they recommend, what we would choose, how much it would cost. It's my understanding that's what Broomfield did. They heard from at least 2, CU and CSU, and then they picked one to go with based on whatever recommendations they make. So I don't know who the outside scientists would determine.
Well, you
what we
keep
needed.
mentioning all these scientists that you
Well, no,
heard, so
no,
that's
no,
why
I said
I'm
it
just
was
bringing
like-
up the fact that
it was not
I'm
a
not
political
discounting
discussion.
them, but we need to go through something more like, where we have actual presentations from somebody who's looked at our
Yeah.
own community.
and I'm not arguing for or against any, my major emphasis will be small scale I mean, I believe through the NPO, the research that they've had, the majority of the pollutants in our air is coming out of state and even from China, you know. 25% is our own oil and gas and
Well,
automobile, and we ought to address that.
Yeah.
I wanna make certain.
Although I
that we
will
can
tell you, I've been on the
manage-
MPO for 10 years, and our
Yeah.
air quality, and the report
It's
from
gotten
the
better,
Denver
yeah.
offices, it's improved
It's
over the
improving,
course of the
right,
10
it
years.
is.
It is not
And-
gotten
and we
worse,
can still
it's
do
actually
more.
made improvements, and that comes
Right.
out of the Colorado Department of
But you know,
Health
if we're
office.
looking at an oil well that's 500 feet away from your bedroom or school, I think we ought to know what's in that area. That's why I'm focused on small scale, because I think we can manage that. If stuff is blowing in, I don't know what to do about that. So that's kind of where I'm at.
So that's a good
I
point,
want to talk
though.
about that third thing though, that, which was the site location, you know, kind of, so I'm really open to, we really need to identify the criteria by where the sites.
But that's
are
part of
gonna
the CUG, right? I thought your
Well-
third thing was no technical staff. Because I had your
We
CUG,
could
that would
say-
look at different conditions, part of it would be, but to
be.
Miles's
I'm not
first
gonna
point.
advocate for this, but we could say no drilling within Windsor. I'm thinking about that because I don't know how much it would hurt us. And if we said no drilling in Windsor, there is no need for a CUG or air monitoring. And if most of the sites have already been identified, it may not hurt us to do that. I'm not advocating yet, okay? I'm thinking this. Okay,
Because you're saying they're already permitted?
I think the ones that are already permitted, we can't do anything about that. So, the site thing, my biggest concern is gonna be whatever safe district is, district distance. And I don't know how to evaluate that, I really don't. That's why I went to air monitoring and the aesthetics in our community. Because even after they're done, you still got the tanks there and, you know, 10 years, 20 years down the road, what do they look like, so.
The COGCC does have all of the flow, or all of the directional bores shown on their mapping and their GIS. I don't know if we could take a look at any areas that may be
Future?
future potential areas that aren't yet drilled, and that might be a way to
It
identify.
might be a moot question for us. I don't know. Also, I know from the industry, they drill down 10,000 feet at least, they can go horizontal 10,000 feet, 2 miles. To the industry, their viewpoint is that location makes a big difference in terms of money for them. So, I mean,
Right.
there's room for compromise, I think. But I mean, that's the radical view, just no drilling and no future.
Yeah,
as an
but
extreme
that would
view.
mean Great Western, and that is one that is future pending, and so why would we stop
Or
that when
maybe-
it's happening
maybe say
already
the
in an
industrial park
industrial?
only.
It's happening already in an industrial
Maybe
park,
say
so
the
why would
industrial
we?
park only, because it
Yeah.
is industrial. I
Right.
don't know.
Did the new
But I don't want to give up, I think Miles said too, and others, I don't think we should give up the right to have some say about location, whatever our criteria turns out to be.
Right, but I think we need criteria to guide
Yeah.
whatever that.
Well, don't we arbitrarily choose other things? Like, we can, I'm not even saying moving off their property, but if we could control where it is on the property, that might make a difference for some people.
Yeah, I looked at David's comments about how
Mhm.
our regulations need to be reasonable, and I
Yes.
agree that if you're basically taking a rulemaking approach in a particular case, that you need to have that kind of legal touchstone. But legislation, matters of broad policy can be as you described, which is, we're not going to make a determination in a particular case based on particular facts. We're just gonna say, if it comes to us in a CUG and there's an alternative site that's available, that you could require that the applicant go to that site. And that may trigger a request for a technical review
That's
board
fine.
with the commission, and that becomes an advisory thing, but there is very little restriction on your ability to legislate when it comes to, under this statute.
But I still would like to see whatever you might be thinking in terms of what criteria
Mhm.
we might need to put in place. so that we could prevent whatever issues might arise if it is looked at as too arbitrary down the road, for protection for the town.
But if we have a whole neighborhood come before us and say that site doesn't work, you're saying we have no discretion, it can't be discretionary?
No, I think you could stack up a land use regulation that says an oil and gas site that is opposed by all of the surrounding residents can't go there. I think you could say that, as long as you apply it consistently.
That's similar, I mean, a lot of language, if you say concerns of the neighborhood, where you just take that as a normal land use
Right,
matter.
it becomes but one criteria for the applicant to prove. Under your regulations, it's like Christie said, you just need to have criteria that are clear. If you find the applicant has not carried its burden when it comes to some or all of the criteria, then each of you has a vote, you could deny it.
So what you're saying is this comes back to what Kim was saying with beefing up the CUG? And what does that look like, or what options could we have to beef it up, et cetera? I mean, you didn't give any specifics about beefing up the CUG, but
I
that's.
saw the land decision as separate than CUG.
The citing decision, right?
The site, yeah, I think is separate, I don't know, maybe not, maybe it's all part of it.
Oh, I thought you wanted it to be tied to the CUG.
No, I saw those, well, my head's all over the place.
Okay.
I saw three different things. I saw the site location as one issue, air quality is another, and CUG. Maybe that's all in the CUG. I don't know how the process, how it would work there. I got a question. In the law, it says the forced pooling has to have 45% of the residents
Right.
or whatever territory approval.
Right.
So I'm just thinking out loud now, in terms of site, what if 45% of the people within the neighborhood had to approve?
Assuming it goes to their neighborhood, it could be going the other way.
Could be. I'm just, yeah.
They could put it on the extreme edge of one next to this neighborhood and drill towards that neighborhood.
Right.
So they're getting the impact with no.
So following your idea, I'm just saying there could maybe be some criteria, because most people are gonna say not in my backyard.
Of course.
So I wanna make certain it's fair and equal to every industry.
Well, if this had come, this is before I was on the board, but I happened to be at one of the board meetings with the Bison Ridge. Was it Bison Ridge?
Right,
And Bison Ridge.
Pad up there where the room was packed and people were
Right.
crying.
That's
and-
case.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, this would have, if we had some location rule in place, that would have simplified that
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Assuming they would accept a location on that parcel of land.
I think we could say no, couldn't we? If we had it was in our purview to just say, no, you can't put it anywhere out there.
Right.
But then, then the industry though has the right to go to this TAC group to say, we're being unreasonable,
So,
right?
yeah, the industry goes to the director and says, we've got a technical problem with Windsor. We can't drill if we can't be somewhere within that area. The director then says, do you want me to convene a technical advisory board? Then the technical advisory board is brought in. It's advisory. It's not, they don't make the decision. They serve as advice to the parties and to the commission in making the decision.
Is there gonna be a cost to the entities that call for the use of this, or is it, or
Doesn't
is
say.
not, we don't know yet.
I suppose that could be captured in the rulemaking.
So, if I look at Wizard, I mean, they're heating in Larimer County, and they're coming Main Street all the way to Seventh. That's like halfway, almost halfway through town from coming outside of town.
Mhm.
So how many spots are there that are left that could actually, where they have to drill within town limits to get to their mineral rights? I
I see
mean,
what you're saying.
So they'll just go outside and drill in, right?
yeah,
If
and then we don't
it-
have the,
Then we get no money.
I mean, well, no, you have to, still have the mineral rights to.
No,
No, if you don't know.
no,
It's at the wellhead.
it's at the wellhead.
Yeah.
For property
They got
tax,
changed.
property tax.
3 or 4 years ago or
Oh,
something.
it's seven.
There's a
Yeah,
lawsuit or something.
Yes,
It
still.
wasn't an issue with Weld County and the towns?
yes.
Yeah, Weld
Oh,
County.
yeah.
Weld County.
Yeah.
Ask our former mayor, he'll give you a.
John was around when
They'll
that
give you a-
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they
it was
are.
not
Lesson on
the end of
that.
his term. I think it was,
Yeah, it was at the, yeah,
I don't remember, but yeah, that
I
got
remember.
changed. And So yeah, if the wellhead is outside of town, the revenue
That's where
doesn't,
the revenue goes.
tax revenue doesn't come to the town.
So is the tax revenue worth the impact? So 2018 was a high water mark for the last few years, about 3.5 million. Year before that, I think it was 1.58 million. That's royalties, severance taxes, all that put together. I mean, County Road 13, how much does it cost to resurface that when they're done? You know what I mean?
I think the benefit, if it outweighed, the impact is gonna be there, if they're in the county or they're in the town. The impact is gonna be on our residents.
Yeah.
Well, and
If
we're,
it's out of town, we have no say in the matter.
the other piece
Well, it's not
of
better
players
back in
who
town.
don't benefit is the districts. It's not just us who loses the
Special
money,
districts,
it's the special districts who lose,
Right.
who lose that too.
But if it's right outside of town, it'd still be in their
School
district though, I think.
No, it's at the wellhead.
No, if the wellhead was full.
Wellhead's in the school district.
If it's
Yeah, if it's in the
wellhead's
school district,
one of
then it
those
came
in
into
the money.
town.
Okay.
So I have 3 things too. How are we gonna gather all this? Cause, well, I'll go through my list.
He's got it all, they got it in there.
Air monitoring, I mean, I think that, and I'm probably closer to Barry than to Ken, if we could, to me, a mobile system that you take 2 or 3 weeks at a site doesn't really measure the impact of that, the air quality.
Let me clarify, just
Okay.
let you know, I want it continuous before the operation and through all 4 stages of the operation. I'm
Okay.
trying to turn this off, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, and I think the data, we don't have,
Yeah.
we've all talked, we don't have the ability or technological ability for the data, but we should just open source it. I mean, if CSU or UNC want to use the data, let's put it out there. Let's measure it and let's put it out there for people to analyze. That's what I would support. And we get all this money from oil and gas, let's put it back into the health, safety, and welfare of our community. Mr. McCarter made a point, since I've been on the board, we've just kind of said, we can't do anything, we put it on the state. So now the state's given us something, and I feel like we should at least start taking steps towards some sort of local control. The other thing, a big deal for me is the reclamation when it's done. I don't know, I know the state has some requirement, but I don't know if there's any teeth from a local standpoint. We're all gonna be off the board in 20 years when these wells are done. What are they doing to reclaim that land? And, I don't know. I know the state has something, but who's,
Unfortunately, that's really been left up to the individual surface landowner. So you've got the well pads that are on, say, the Water Valley properties that are well incorporated into the surrounding surface land uses. But then you've got the ones on, say, maybe it's just a agricultural property and they didn't care about any berming or any kind of screening because it's just surrounded by corn or beets. And so those are the ones that probably won't look as good down the road.
and who's inspecting them and all? So reclamation is a big deal. And this is just something I thought I had was maybe some sort of citizens advisory. I mean, we all know we're throwing all these things out there, but maybe there is some people in our community that could meet twice a month and come up with some of their ideas. I don't know, just a thought. I don't know how we would choose those people even.
Yeah, we probably ought to see how the CLG board gets along.
Yeah. Larimer County just created a citizens advisory board. I think it has something like 15 members, but they had, I just finished up Larimer County 101. There were over 90 applicants, and they chose 15 members. But they do have an advisory board that is specifically put together to determine how Larimer County is gonna handle their land use when it comes to oil and gas.
I mean, we have all these residents.
There's a
that are
website.
in the industry. They could at least, again, I don't know how we would choose the composition of this board, but it was just an idea I had. If, we're sitting here in this room with one faithful resident here. I mean, should we be out in the community seeing what the community wants?
Comment on something you said, under the new conditions, we have the authority to talk about it says permanent screening. So when you talk about reclamation, I mean, it's really a mind shift, I think, because in the past, it's been, we basically have nothing to say about it. But as I've read things, and as I understand it, we have a lot to say about a lot of things now. So my point is, we need to really think through
I mean, reclaim the dirt, make sure the
what do
soil
we
is,
want 20 years from now,
Yeah.
everything's planted. That
Well, and I
counts.
do know
within
there's,
reason.
in Greeley, a company that's part of the oil and gas industry, that last year, they did a large amount of reclamation.
Yeah.
That's keenly important to them. They actually even reclaimed a whole bunch of sites that weren't even, that they didn't
Yeah.
have to. But again, it's,
There are some companies within the industry that have a good reputation for
Yeah.
going above and beyond.
yes.
You know, and that may well be a part of our standards when we.
And we can charge these companies, it looks
Yeah.
like we can now charge these companies for.
But like Red and J,
Stuff.
over in my neighborhood, you know, Ranchers Exploration run a business. And this is like the lowest common denominator, which sometimes we have to consider. Because right now, what's going on is they're doing this 2-month reclamation, and then when the COGCC is done doing that, they're trying to seal it off, so no water seeps through it, so they capped the 2 wells. That thing was a disaster, I think most of you know the story. And then when they're done, the CDPHE is gonna come in and put in wells to monitor the water, because they don't know if they contaminated Jody Reservoir, or the Poudre River is at the bottom of that hill as well. And so, you know, part of the bill is wildlife habitat and the environment. We haven't talked about that, so we could, Frank State Wildlife Area, we have other areas, the Poudre River Trail. You know, those are opportunities that we have to protect those sites from the lowest common denominator, unfortunately.
Well, and the legislation does command that the commission adopt rules that deal with abandoned wells, flow line safety, all that sort of the aftermath of the industry. So that may go on at the state level to a level that we're comfortable with. And that's again another thing that we just don't know what the rules will look like. I did look back through this, and July 2020 seems to be an outside target. If you read the legislation, it talks about how this composition of the commission is gonna look like this until the rules are adopted, or July of 2020. So it sounds like that's the outside date when we could expect to see the full rulemaking. So they've given
So they give
themselves
themselves a year.
A year.
I have a question. on
Well,
that.
and if experts in the field are giving themselves a year, then they know this is not an easy task to solve.
Yeah.
It says in your memo, the following powers are specifically authorized. Fees on operators or owners to cover the reasonable, foreseeable, direct, and indirect regulatory costs. If we decide that air quality is we could charge them for the monitoring. It's regulatory.
Right, and I
If you wanna
don't,
do business in Windsor and drill, and we could put that on them.
I think so. My only question is whether we're limited to the new people, or whether we can by code say anybody who is indulging this activity in Windsor is gonna pay a fee. Starting today, here's the fee. That's my question. I don't know.
Well, I don't think we should not monitor the air if it's, in theory, nobody going forward will drill here except the ones already permitted. So there would be, you're saying there's no way to recoup that cost?
Right,
Because they've already.
but I do think you could impose a fee structure that's uniform for all operators who are doing business in Windsor.
Because we're regulating past permits.
Yeah, but you are reaching back to people who were already permitted under the old regime, but you're saying from this date forward, under this legislation, here's a fee that everybody's gotta pay.
And even if it doesn't cover the full amount of whatever this equipment is, we might do some research on.
Just like any other fee, where you have an idea what it might cost. You set your fee rate based on that and hope that you approach the total cost without going over.
Go for 50% even if we think it's important enough.
Sure.
Could you have a presentation to go through?
If you did a feed, like, so, just hypothetically,
It's all here.
I know.
if there's like 50 wellheads and they've only drilled 16, as they come up to do the rest of those, could you then impose the fee then? If they haven't, like, and just a thought as we move through it.
Yeah, I'm saying I think you can impose the fee. It's a
Okay.
new fee. It doesn't burden past behavior, it goes forward and says, if you're gonna do business in Windsor in this way, then everybody who does that has to pay $1 a month or whatever the fee rate is.
So, we could fee on continuing business?
On the activity,
On
saying
the
if you are engaged in this kind of business, then from this date forward, there's a fee.
What
The
are
difference
regulatory-
is, we're
Under
not,
police powers.
the difference is we're not questioning their permit, they're already
Right,
permitted.
right.
But as you continue operations, so it's kind of like stormwater. We can come back now, see businesses and say you have to clean the water. Same kind of concept?
Yeah, it's the police powers that we have. We're not affecting their permit, we're
Okay.
doing what the legislation says.
Okay. Interesting.
There is an aspect to this that, you know, and the marijuana wars reminds me of it. The amount of effort that went in at the town board level, and then there was a citizen-initiated ordinance that undid it all. That's kind of how that happened. Be aware that if the citizens, you know, you have a pretty good measure of how the community feels about this
Right.
from 112.
Right.
Be aware that the community could rise up through the initiated process or through referendum to do and undo things.
Right.
I just want to make certain that that's clear, that it's certainly up to you, but there's another player in the room that
Right.
could.
Absolutely.
act.
Of course. Absolutely.
And we've had experience with that.
So I don't think we have, I mean, I think we have some consensus about wanting to look at certain things. I don't think we have consensus on taking action immediately on anything. So what's,
Can we get a recap?
did you hear something
Yeah,
about how you guys might be able to move forward?
Sure, I mean,
The next steps?
I'm envisioning, this coming back in another work session. I don't think we're ready for any kind of ordinance at this point or any kind of change. I think that we would probably wanna look like maybe into July. I don't think this is something that we can pull together in the next couple of weeks. I think we're gonna need a little bit of time. The things I think we're looking at are obviously air quality monitors. See kind of what Longmont did, what's out there, how we could bring something in, the cost, what resources are currently there.
Well, I think even before that though, I heard somebody say, talking to some experts in the field, so that we even have I heard like CSU or that whoever is in this realm, that we have a conversation with before we go down the path to even, I mean, I think we need somebody to guide us there a little bit, so we even know what we're looking for, or what we're looking at, or what we should be looking at.
I think we're on the same page. I think that's what we want, is to have somebody come in and talk to us and say, what are our options?
In that, you know, I'm even kind of envisioning Mayor, maybe this is its own work session, just having somebody come in
Yeah.
and present to the board on air quality and what they can do.
I
So-
suggest when I talked to Jason, I can't remember his last name, he's the Longmont staff person that's head of all that. His question to me was really good. He said, what is it you want to do?
I'm gonna send you a contact.
And that's why I said, I want a small scale.
Well, that's where you come back
So,
to,
I mean,
if
our
the
question is-
results say X, if the air
Yeah.
quality monitoring says X, what do we do, or what can be done?
That's what I was
to remedy
wanting
that.
Right, but I thought that question is maybe something we'll need to talk about too. What is it we, in terms of air monitoring, what is it we want to do? We wouldn't have to talk about that tonight, but before we talk to experts.
Well, one of the things-
Well,
If you wanna do this,
but I think I even need to hear from some
Yeah,
experts,
okay.
Ken. I mean, and have a bigger discussion before I even decide that next question,
Okay.
like,
Well,
what is it
let's-
we want to do?
Okay, so we had air quality, obviously, we wanna look at some constraints or how we can do set location, if we could come up with some language on aesthetics, setback distance. You know, just at least a framework for the board, to where we could regulate that. I think this is something that we could regulate through the CUG. Again, we can talk to staff, but I think I'm just envisioning kind of taking our normal CUG process and seeing what are the constraints we could add to that. I heard checking with Greeley and Fort Collins, you know, may see again regulatory what they're doing.
And not just those bigger communities, but also the smaller communities who might be very similar to the situation we're in. Like, what is Eaton gonna do? What is?
If you've already got
Summerside
oil and
gonna
gas in your
do? What
community.
is Johnstown and Milliken gonna
Mayor
do?
Pro Tem Bertha talked to me quite a bit about what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, I think we reached out to like Severance and Johnstown and Greeley.
Yep.
We kept it kind of on the Weld County side, just we thought, you know, there's a lot more obviously production on this
Yes.
side of the world. So we did reach out to those communities again, I think at least a couple of months ago, just seeing, you know, is there,
But I think we should reach out to other communities. I mean, Timmins is a good example. Who cares if it's in Lammer? I mean, it's still kind of a peer group.
well, yeah, absolutely. As far as I mean, right now I just heard about the moratorium, though. I haven't heard of any regulatory thing other
And
than,
they're looking at moratorium.
I think they're in.
Got one.
Timnith
Yes.
and Severance, you said?
I don't know, I don't think Severance.
I don't think Severance.
Bertha
No.
did.
Bertha.
Yeah, I think
The
it's Bertha
newspaper
and
said
Timmins.
7 communities.
It's us. I didn't look at the
I
news.
saw the
Okay,
article.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay, because you're right, I mean, we shouldn't just limit ourselves, I'm just saying that staff was thinking all the same things, you know, are they gonna regulate, what are they looking at, because, like he said, this is kind of Wild West right now, we don't have any template, this is a new law, and I think everybody wants to do the right thing for our communities, but we don't really have a framework to follow.
How much of this topic is on the agenda for CML? Because I'm not attending this year, but I can imagine there's gonna be a lot
There's
of
gotta
talk
be at
about
least,
this.
at least.
No, I know for sure they're going to, because, yeah.
Unless they're adding a track or something, because I don't know.
No, I spoke to Brandy Delane, one of the lobbyists about it, and, you know, and I think she was struggling to put a panel together, because nobody knows what they're gonna do yet. They wanna have a panel to say, this is what we've done, and I think most communities are where we are, like, I don't know what we've done yet, so. So I think the other thing we talked about, or whether or not we just did a site-specific zoning, you know, industrial park only, so, I don't know what work we do from staff to see, like, what's built and if that would be a possibility. We had the question on reclamation, can we do anything locally? I think that's maybe a function of the state, but that is a question I think for staff to look into more, would there be a local reclamation, requirement? You brought up the Citizen Advisory Committee, I don't think there's anything for staff to do at this point, other than know that idea is out there. So those are the kind of the key points I heard tonight. So if there's anything that you would like staff to research and bring back, and if you don't think about it tonight, if you think about it later, we can certainly do that.
Can you just talk about the reclamation again? Do you think, what were you saying?
Well, I think that the state, I mean, to me, when I think reclamation of wells, I think that's a more technical aspect, you know, to properly reclaim, to cap it right, to me, that's a pretty technical process.
Mhm.
So I would think that'd be more state. Now, if we say, geez, we want you to plant some trees around it, and, you know, there may be an aesthetic component to the reclamation.
I think that's what I was thinking of.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, so I think that would be an easy part of the CUG, honestly. You know, that part, yeah, I'm just thinking more on, you know, if you have this well that's 10,000 feet deep, I think that's.
Oh,
really-
yeah, I'm not gonna say, oh, you didn't cap that correctly,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
well, whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to trust that process with the state, but.
Okay, so you're just
I'm
thinking on the
thinking-
aesthetic side,
Yeah,
just
like how they-
restoration.
I don't know, do you have to dig the dirt 5 feet and replace it? I don't know any of that, but I'm just wondering if there is something.
So you're thinking more like restoration, not reclamation, more like
Okay.
site restoration. No, I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, I
because to
know.
me, restoration is like, make it look like there wasn't a well here
Yes.
before.
Yes.
Where reclamation is like the more
Okay.
technical.
Safety.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's not
Okay.
leaking,
Restoration,
things like
thank
that.
you.
Yeah. The only other thing is maybe, are we gonna have protected areas, you know? Do we have any like open space, like the Frank State Wildlife or the Poudre River? Just a thought, a note, as we move through this.
Yeah, it's too close to the river anyway, I would think.
We're all across the river.
When I heard you guys talking about site location and aesthetics and setbacks, to me, I'm thinking, what would you be setback from? When I hear that, I think, is that a river? Is that a school? I mean, so to me, those things kind of
Okay.
came in together. I don't know that, but I would think that if you've got a sensitive site, that's what a setback would be from.
Right.
I'm thinking about your bedroom.
I don't know where you're going with this conversation.
I like clarifying that.
No, I mean,
Never thought about it.
We've talked about open space and buffers. So, I mean, part of it, if we allow a well now, and 5 years from now, we decide that's open space, we got tanks sitting there. So that's gonna be part of that
Well, we're saying it's
location.
open space first,
Yeah.
before the tank goes in.
Right, but we haven't identified the open space, so well, they might come first.
Like Tiger was gonna have one.
Yeah,
That,
Tiger was gonna have one, right?
Good job on that, by the way.
yeah, that's.
Because you were talking about land use, and we haven't really laid that all out yet.
We got land use map.
Yeah,
Isn't that what we're going through right now, or have,
Yeah,
and
but we
revising and that sort of
I
thing?
don't think we've identified the open space though. I'm just throwing that out as another piece of where,
Oh, don't we have a work session coming up on that?
yeah, we do,
pretty
I'm
soon?
sure we do.
We've got,
There are a couple,
Don't be so sure.
we've identified a couple of
Yeah.
open space, yeah. I mean, it's kind of vague,
Yeah,
but we have one on the west side and kind of one on the east side, of Great Western there a little bit. And
Well-
Greeley, and, I mean, at least we've had some conversation. I don't know that we've
Yeah.
solidified anything, but there
So we
is
could have well
that
before
conversation,
the
and,
That's where Frank would fall into an open space, right? So we should look more at open spaces across the board, not at one particular site.
We have Trails and Open Space update on June 24th.
Yeah, get ready.
That's Eric's, isn't it?
That'll be waiting.
I don't know, you might wanna be here for that.
you might want to,
Keep an eye on those two.
That's right. I guess that is a competing thing to think about, is if you
yeah,
say you don't want oil and gas in your open space,
Yeah.
which is when you're allowing the oil and gas and carving out a big buffer area, you're actually creating a lot of open space on the surface. So there's kind of a competing
yeah,
element
There
there.
is.
And a lot of the open space tracts that we have on the perimeter of town do already have oil and gas on
Right.
them.
Right.
So it's,
yeah,
I could see the surface owners saying, well, if you say we can't build homes within the oil and gas setback, and we're
Yeah.
willing to do what it takes to buffer it and screen it and make it, hidden, like some of the examples we've got, then the surface owners are gonna say, well, you're carving out several acres of developable ground
Right.
from my,
right.
so there'll be arguments on that side of it too, I think, as well, so.
That's another issue.
Okay, any other thoughts from the board that you want us to work on? And just looking ahead on the future meetings, I mean, I'm thinking right now, maybe that July 15th work session, right now is currently open, so,
July 15th,
yes, ma'am. So
I will not be here.
Okay,
That's,
We have the potential to, if we wanted to bump
I
something.
will be
to-
out the
there's-
4th to the
Move
15th.
stuff around possibly.
you'll be up from the 1st to 15th?
4th.
Fourth, okay, so the one on the 8th wouldn't work either.
you're out on the 10th also.
29th.
10th and 15th, okay.
Okay, well, so
Was
with the
David here
board,
for all this?
would the board be okay if this, maybe it was more like August 12th or something? Cause I don't think we'd get anything in June.
What
I'll
about,
have to look up, I'm taking a week off in August, so I'll look at the calendar real quick, if we're going up that far.
Okay.
Because we're talking a work session?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or maybe even a couple of them there, I think,
Right, right.
we're
Oh,
gonna,
yeah.
their quality
Oh,
is
yeah.
probably its own work session.
for the technical people, we could probably gather them quicker than you guys trying to compile all this information, right? Or
Well, I think we could, but again, just,
if you're looking to break it up into two, right? Bring in
Mhm.
the technical people at one point and.
maybe, and, right now I'm just constraining us to the normal Mondays, but we could always look at,
Well, there's a fifth Monday too.
what, in July?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm definitely on
You're out?
vacation that week,
Okay.
yes.
That's fine.
I'm just saying, fifth Monday.
Well, why can't we wait
I'm
till
just-
August? I mean, it's not, again,
Well, because other people, I think, said they were. out.
oh, we're gonna be out.
I'm not out till later August,
Nice.
so there's like August 5th,
Like-
there's. when
Well,
are you out?
cause we could, we could put
Off
that,
that from the 10th to the 16th.
So you'll be here on August 5th?
Yeah.
August fifth is, you know about that?
Yeah, so right now we have the strategic plan update, but you know, we could see if we could maybe bump that up a little bit or push it back a week. We could go, we could make that a week later, and do this August 5th for sure.
Okay.
And then, you know, we could start looking, you know, later this week and really see, if some of that contact from Longmont, you know, I'd like to look into their process, see how they identified CUC issues, see what was presented to them, and maybe set up something similar where we have just kind of these, you know, kind of local experts coming in and presenting on how they would measure Windsor, what would make sense, and so, you know, so maybe, Miles, to your point, maybe that could happen sooner. I'm just thinking, you know, getting that scheduled and stuff and getting on people's schedules, it may still take a little
Yeah,
while.
the guy from CU, they asked him where, if he could pick a couple places in Windsor. I think of Windsor or Platteville, might have been, I don't know if there's another one. But he actually mentioned us as would be a good, to have kind of air quality monitoring across the Front Range. He had called us out, but he's a CU PhD, I just emailed it to you.
Okay.
I found his website, just forwarded it to you.
Okay, and then while we're all looking on the future town board meetings, I do want to point out, right now on June 17th, all we have scheduled is a new employee introduction. And I think as great as it is to have them come in, and I mean, we're hiring great people, right? I mean, that was nice, I mean, those four folks. But if that's, and right now it looks like that's all we've got, so I would not want to bring the board in just to, for 5 minutes. So if nothing emerges in the next couple days, we'll probably just cancel that. Again, that is a week of CML, so, you know, I know everybody said you'd be around and you're happy to meet, but, you know, wouldn't just come in to have everybody look at each other and eat Cheez-Its. So, if nothing emerges pretty quick as an agenda item, then we'll just cancel that meeting, okay?
And I'm out the 24th of June.
Okay, is there a,
That's our
oh yeah,
work
right.
session and our town board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're looking to bring people in, besides just professors, I'd also like to hear somebody in specific who's working in the industry, you know, some industry experts too, not just professors.
About air quality?
Yes. Because I'm sure there's gotta be folks who are working in that realm in some shape or form, that aren't professors, just, you know, who's collecting data and information.
It'll be
So
a
that we get-
rehash though before
that we
the
get-
election last
Okay.
year, you know. There's two sides,
Right.
kind of going at each other.
Well, I think if we got the guy that I listen to, he will not get political. If somebody tries to say something about the industry, he will not. He just talks about air and the quality of the air and maybe the source of where it comes from and things like that.
I'm not
So
talking about the
maybe
oil and
we can-
gas industry, Tom. I'm talking about somebody who's in the air quality and the air monitoring.
Oh.
Just like
Oh, I
maybe,
thought you meant- okay.
no, not, yeah, like the guy that you talked to in Longmont. I mean, somebody, I mean,
Right.
he might even be an expert now because he's been working the machine or, you know, what
He would be good, I
he might
guess.
say, if
Right.
we had to do this over again, I would do this or
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
the
what I'm
best
talking about,
experience.
not
Okay.
necessarily, I mean, it might be, there might be somebody in the industry who also says, hey, we're doing a lot of that right now, and we can come and talk to you, but I'm talking more about somebody besides just somebody
Kind
who's
of.
talking about teaching this, somebody who's actually working in this stuff,
Yeah, I got
or,
you. That makes more sense.
yes.
So that'd be like, I mean, like the
Yeah.
state, I mean, if the state goes around and monitors air quality, right, there's gotta be somebody who's like,
Well, there's gotta be, there's gotta be.
So the person I was talking about, I guess he doesn't fit the bill of, he's in a classroom professor type, he's the one who's doing the air quality monitoring and maintains the stations and analyzes the data.
Right.
So he's not just some teacher.
yeah.
And
And one of the questions I asked is, when Paul brought up, what do you do with the data? And I asked Longmont about that, I didn't give him enough time, and I asked Lambert County what they're gonna do with their advisor too, and I didn't get clear answer, but,
Yeah.
so I think your question was really.
We're not just gonna be gathering data to be gathering it.
Right,
We gotta,
no, no,
there's
that's
to be
right,
a separate.
that's right.
Exactly.
Because if there's nothing to do with it, or,
Why, right,
or if they're already meeting state limits or
Right.
state, minimums or.
Don't we have anything
Whatever.
at all that's doing any of that?
Prove it.
Sorry.
That's all right, sorry.
You just know we can't bring in the camel, we can't bring in
I
the
mean-
camel though.
and I think I know what to do.
Or only when we have a concern, do we call them out? Because they're-
I think the rain dance pad has some air monitoring on it, and that's why I need to follow up with Great Western to see what level, because I know that in the
And when they
past,
started it, so that we might know, like, I mean, would they, they may not, but would they share information like the time, if they've had it the whole time, like from the beginning to what it looks like today or not?
that I don't know if it was there
Okay.
from day one, but I do know that they've responded to some of their air complaints, and they do have some level of monitoring on site. And so that way, and they give access to that data to the CO, GCC. So I can find out what level and what kind of equipment they've got on site.
Okay.
I think that's the only pad that has it though.
Okay, but we've never had anything that, I mean, you tried to bring something in and
Yeah.
apparently that failed, we were never able to.
Yeah, it was the whole generator thing and not having access to the amount of power they need to utilize that laboratory. It takes a pretty good
I'll ask you later.
electrical connection.
Okay.
Extension cord?
No,
It's
like 220
Solar.
They're orange. They're all big orange.
Yeah,
CNG.
Egg sucker. Don't touch.
so we looked into that and they just couldn't make it work, so.
Okay. Okay. You guys have enough to do?
Yeah, I've got a few pages of notes, so. That's good, okay, well, I appreciate the feedback from the board and everybody's thoughts, so we've got plenty of work to do.
I've got
Yeah,
a
so-
burning question from a
Yeah, you'll need to
constituent.
run that meeting
The 8th and
Why all the street numbers, first, second, third, fourth, are numerical, and you get to seventh and it's spelled out, so.
That's your food?
I'd ask the former mayor.
That's my attitude out in the country.
Who was thinking? You?
Goddamn water.
His wife.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
The presentation that you did,
I know, I figured that.
Are we on to Wednesday?
Yeah,